Hello fellow humans and welcome to the review of the 60 TP tech tree. Now obviously I'm going to start at tier 6 and then go all the way up. Now here we have the 40 TP. In terms of the modules, there is only one stock gun and one upgraded gun, so yeah, just upgrade it and there you go. Same goes for the tier 7, the tier 8 and also the tier 9, so this is very straightforward line. There aren't any weird other guns to deal with, so it's always going to be research the gun and then go to the next tank basically, which is great for a line, and it is also great for a beginner. So this is probably the best beginner line currently that is in World Tanks Blitz, because it's very straightforward, it's very easy, and the tanks are also very good, especially starting at tier 8. Now obviously, how would I equip these vehicles? I'm going to do that as well, obviously, because it is roughly the same for all of them. Consumables, always use the multi-kit and the regular repair kit, and adrenaline or speed boost, I wouldn't use that on these. And then if you can afford it, the top 3 provisions. If not, I wouldn't use any of these because, I mean, what's the point? So, and in terms of the ammo, always mostly AP, some heat, some HE. And then in terms of the equipment, now these are heavy tanks, so I would use a refined gun over the vertical stabilizer. Obviously, toolbox always a thing. Consumable delivery system would always prefer that as well. Same goes with the engine accelerator and the improved optics. And then for these vehicles, probably is improved assembly is the safer option. Enhanced armor doesn't really help that much with these types of tanks, but it can definitely do because of the way the front plates of these vehicles are sloped. So enhanced armor, improved assembly, it's up to you whichever one you feel more comfortable with or not. Then with the improved modules, same there. Defense system or improved modules, whichever one you feel comfortable, whichever one you want to protect more. Obviously, it might be useful to use the defense system on the 60 TP because the 60 TP does like to blow up. So minus 7% chance to ammo rack is very nice there. But then again, this gives you more durability on that, so it doesn't really matter whichever one you use. And then I would use the enhanced gun laying drive. It's not a tank destroyer, so get that better aim time. And the same goes for the gun rammer, where I would boost that DPM up a little bit on all of them as well to get more out of them. Now, you can use calibrated if you want to get more penetration, if you don't feel very well in your aim and stuff like that, and you want to have that extra penetration. They do have heat, or at least the 6TP does have heat. And with the heat gun, calibrated can be very advantageous because obviously you get 10% more penetration rather than 5. So you can use calibrated on the 6 TP, but I would recommend gun rammer for all the others. So now, let's compare them all. What's the biggest step up? Let's then look at the armor of the tier 8 to the tier 10, and then let's play all of them and to give you a picture of what this line is about and why you should probably definitely grind it, especially if you are a new player. So now let's look at the Blitzstar stats here of all of them, and what you can see is that the DPM stays the same from tier 8 to tier 6. Then after that, from tier 9 to 10, you get a step up. The biggest step up, obviously, you get alpha damage and more penetration, and they do increase gradually for most of the time, which is also a great thing, just to step those things up nicely and not just have one tank have a completely weirdly different alpha damage, which is not a great thing for a beginner. You know, it all makes sense and progresses gradually in a way that is understood. Now, they all have 8 degrees of gun depression except for the 60 TP, which is also another great thing, and the aim time on the lower ones are better than those of the higher ones, but that is not too big of a problem. Obviously, the bigger guns are going to have somewhat less alpha damage, so that's fine, I would assume, and the dispersion is going to roughly stay the same as well, which is a nice thing. Then the power to weight ratio on the tier 6 is absolutely horrible. I mean, the tier 6 in general is not a very great tank, so if you have free XP, I would skip either the tier 6 or the tier 7, because while they're decent, they're not great, and especially the tier 6 has a very different armor profile than the others. So if you can skip the tier 6, then I would recommend doing so. Now, in terms of the mobility, they're all roughly around the same 40 to 35 kilometers an hour mobility. And the engine power stays around the same for most of the time, at least. The effective power to weight ratio from the tier 6 and the tier 10 doesn't really change much. It goes up and down a bit here, with the 53 TP having somewhat the highest here, at least on the hard terrain, but yeah, I think the mobility is overall very similar. Same with the traverse speed, where only the 53 again is a bit more mobile. Then obviously we look at the armor at the end as well, and I mean the view range doesn't change, which is there. The armor as well, you have 160, 170, 220, 250, and 280. So again, very gradual, very nice step up there. Weirdly enough, the hull armor on the tier 6 is pretty much as high as you can go. So that's just definitely something you have to watch out for. But now, to all intents and purposes, a tier 6 and a tier 7, they have decoy armor where you're going to get penned a lot of the times anyway. So let's now have a look at, obviously, that you can, if you angle them properly, you can get bounces and all that. But in terms of the armor, it does get serious at tier 8. So let's have a now look at the armor of the tier 8 to tier 10. We start off with the 53 TP, which is one of the strongest tier 8s in the game. Also one of the strongest heavy tanks. Now, 240 millimeters up here, which is very nice. Only something like a T-34 or a tank destroyer is going to be able to penetrate with standard rounds. So you are very well protected, especially against also tier 7s. Tier 9s won't have much of a problem. Now, the turret is very, very strong and almost impenetrable here. You do have these flanks on the side, but then again, you do need some tier 9 tank destroyer rounds to be able to go through this. And you have the cupola, which can be penned relatively easily. Even if you use the 8 degrees gun depression, it is somewhat visible. So that is something they have to watch out for. But this, given that this is the most mobile one, it can wiggle this back and forth very easily if you are using the 8 degrees of gun depression on this vehicle. Now, I don't recommend putting this tank in a city. I never do. However, if you do want to side scrape or you have something to side scrape off like a rock or a dead tank, then it can do that very well. 290 millimeters here and 100 millimeters at the top. It is very strong side armor that can be used very well for side scraping. But then again, you have to watch out for the turret to not be penned in the cupola when you're side scraping out this direction. If you're side scraping out on this side, that is not going to be such a problem. The top is only 50 millimeters. So if someone's above you, they're going to be able to pen that very easily, but that's nothing new. Same goes for the upper plate. The lower plate's very small, but also very thin, so it's going to be very, very easy to pen. Now we get to the tier 9, and this thing does have quite a few more problems than the tier 8. Namely, this plate here, which does stop it from side scraping essentially completely, because obviously this extra turret ring sticks out, and it can be penned completely here at pretty much any angle, which is not great for it. So side scraping shouldn't be tried with this one. But then again, the 90mm plate down here is good enough to pull it off if the enemy doesn't know about this plate up here, which now you do. Lower plate's a lot bigger than on a tier 8. It is thicker, 220mm of armor. Tier 8 mediums are going to struggle to pen this, but no tier 9, no tier 10 is going to have any problem penetrating that. The upper plate can be very strong. You do have this driver's hatch sticking out, so you're going to have to watch out to be penned here as well. So try to wiggle this tank as much as possible. You have a strong upper plate, but the lower plate's very big, very weak. And you also have this driver's hatch right in the middle and the turret ring, which is not great. Now, obviously, in a side scraping position, this won't be a problem because of the angle. However, if something ricochets off here and bounces into this part, that is not going to be very nice for you. So the design of this tank is very poor in terms of side scraping. And you also do have 2 cupolas on top. And with the 8 degrees of gun depression, you can somewhat hide those. You can hide them a lot better than you can on a tier 8 in terms of the armor. And also the turret is a lot more rounded, a lot more well protected. So that is definitely the upside here. So I would definitely try to go for somewhat of a more hull down playstyle with this vehicle than I would with a tier 8, where you also can do some side scraping and stuff like that. And now we get to the big boy, and that is the 60 TP. And obviously, it's supposed to have the strongest armor. Well, not quite. The front plate doesn't really change much from the tier 6, but the angle is very strong. You do have this driver's hatch as well. However, 270mm, most tier 10 standard rounds aren't going to be enough. Same for the upper plate. However, for heat, that is absolute butter on the front plate. For a lot of them, at least. Now, 360mm, it's very strong. But especially tank destroyers, they're going to go straight through. So you want to have to watch out for that. And especially if someone's above you, you're gone. If you're using the 7 degrees of gun depression, now 1 degree less, yes. However, it's pretty much impenetrable in a position like that. The cupola is on top. It is very small. It is relatively easy to hide and also very hard to hit. So that is definitely a bonus there. And the turret as well is insanely strong. So you can pretty much forget penetrating this turret frontally. And you should always try to go for either the driver's hatch or the lower plate, which is smaller again than on the tier 9. However, it is still very, very vulnerable. In terms of the side armor, You don't really gain that much, 100 millimeters instead of 90, but as you can see, it is definitely strong enough to side scrape at an angle like this, and you don't have a sticking out plate as much as the T9 does, but you still have this tiny plate here that you can get penned into if you're trying to side scrape with it. So you also have to watch out for that. If someone's knowledgeable enough to be able to shoot here, you will be penetrated if you are side scraping. So yeah, just try to hide the hull as much as you possibly can and play around the very strong turret armor of this vehicle. So now let's get into the battle with the Tier 6 here, and obviously before that, if you are enjoying the video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and also thank you very much to my channel members. Really appreciate the support, and if you want to support the channel, the join button is right next to the subscribe button. Now, the Tier 6, it's a very uninteresting tank. It's a regular Tier 6. It has the very flat armor plate here that you're gonna get penned through most of the time. However, the other plate here is very strong. Pretty much can't be penned there. Now, you have 2000 DPM, which is, I mean, somewhat normal for the lower tiers. Lower tiers tend to have more DPM, but less armor, which does sort of make them a bit harder to actually survive in. But they are easy to play because obviously you have more chances to cause a lot of damage, which should theoretically be somewhat easier. Now, ideally, what I'm going to do here is not get shot by the Thunder, who decided to peek out against an SU-100Y, which is something that you probably shouldn't do most of the time. And a Cryos is also... I honestly don't know why that tank exists. It should have never done so, but Wargaming loves money, so they've done that. And obviously, overall, this is a somewhat average to mediocre vehicle, and there is definitely nothing special about this, and I don't think it's really worth keeping either. It is somewhat okay. You do have the 200 alpha damage, but other than that, there is absolutely nothing that makes this tank interesting and outstanding. So to grind through it, to just play it for a couple of battles, sure, to get the XP for the next one, and also to get experience with this sort of slower, more alpha damage playstyle. It is a great vehicle to do that. However, overall, it is not really a tank that I would consider ever playing outside of simply trying to achieve the 60 TP, and I think that's perfectly fine. It's not supposed to be anything special, and it definitely isn't. So there is that, and there's a U-Panzer. Alright. Now, the mobility is, as you can see, it's not great, but I think it's a decent get-in to the line. Because obviously, before this, with the Tier 5 and Tier 4, you do have these Swedish vehicles, which are completely different in terms of how they play, which is not great, but then again, you're probably not going to spend much time at Tier 5 and lower anyway, so that isn't that big of a deal. Because after, I think, 50 to 100 battles, you're done down there, and then you can just simply move on, and you already have the Tier 5s for 4 lines unlocked, which is also another very nice feature to getting this line first. And obviously, I'm going to get focused here, because what people like to do is they get kills. They don't as much care about damage. They care more about the kills. Therefore, the lower HP you are, the more likely you are to get shot at. So that is also something to keep in mind if you're in the lower tiers. And obviously in the higher tiers as well. The less HP you do have, the more you're going to get shot at. And there you go, this T-34 is gone. Now it's only the T-37 left. So, let's do that. Now we get to the Tier 7 and the 45 TP. Now this vehicle does have the ability to use tungsten shells. I don't do that, however, because obviously I'm very much used to using adrenaline all the time, so I just click it after shooting. So I'm simply using the adrenaline, and the thing is, it doesn't really make that much of a difference because both do the same thing, just slightly differently, where the adrenaline gives you more DPM by faster reload, and the tungsten shells gives you more DPM by having a higher damage roll available. However, I do prefer the adrenaline because obviously if you do miss your tungsten shells or anything like that, it's gone and you've basically wasted it. If you have the adrenaline, you can get the second shot faster, so I just prefer that style of increasing the DPM of the vehicle. However, if you want to do it differently, if you do want to use the tungsten shells, then there is absolutely no reason not to. However, I would absolutely not use both. You could do that technically, but always use 2 repair kits. There is no point in not doing that because It is a lot more important to be on the safe side there than trying to get some theoretical extra damage that is going to be useful in only a couple of cases. So use the 2 repair kits, and then whichever one of tungsten or whichever one that you think is going to do better for yourself, because there is no difference really in how good they are. However, this tank is already a lot better than the T6 by having, well, angled frontal armor. You do have a bit more survivability there. Now, obviously, it's not very much thicker, which doesn't really change much all the way up to tier 10. The armor plates don't really get thicker, but they do get more well angled, so they get almost kind of thicker. But yeah, okay. Now, most of the team is over there on the other side, which is not great. But I'll try to stay around here and then now drop off behind and then use the third armor in this vehicle, which is relatively strong, besides the cupola, to simply hide here and hold these guys back and also get some extra damage, because why the hell not? So, Cromwell's wanting some help. Premium rounds in this tank, as you can see, are enough to go through an AMX. So, it's a very decent tier 7. Obviously, it is nowhere near something like a Smasher, but overall, it is a tank that can also be used outside of grinding the line. And I think this is pretty much the best tank to stop for a bit longer and then also try to learn the playstyle a lot more. Because obviously, if you don't learn it at the lower tier, you're gonna be horrible at tier 10. You know, if you just go from tier 6 to tier 10 instantly, especially when you're a new player, you're gonna go through and then you've gotten a tier 10 in 200 games, but you absolutely suck and you're going to ruin everyone else's day that you have to play against or play with. So I would definitely urge you to try to play the tanks till you're good with them, not till you're done with them. So, okay, now what we're going to do, I'm going to ignore the guy behind me. I'm going to go for the KV2 here. Obviously, don't want to really run after a medium tank. That's not going to help, especially with this kind of heavy tank mobility. And the KV2 might do some funny stuff, but it is decent side armor, just like the tier 8 have I showed you. And there we go. I mean, it's a, I think 116 millimeters of penetration or something AP round on that KV2. But yeah, it can side scrape a bit, and can definitely also be beneficial if you have to be putting yourself into a situation like that, which is a nice bonus. And there's the Poodle, which is the last one alive. And obviously, this is a tier 6 game. So it's a lot easier. In a tier 8 game, you might want to be just a little bit more held back to not die that fast. And 2.7k damage, I think that's not too bad for a tier 7. So now let's get into the 53 TP. And obviously, we're going to not go into the city because that's a very bad idea. And I think this is one of the strongest tier 8s to have in the game, pretty much. Obviously, there are something like T4A2 that are going to be better. But in terms of like this sort of Russian style heavy tank, this is probably the best one that you can have. I mean, you also even do have the 8 degrees of gun depression, which is another amazing addition to that, which a lot of the others that have this kind of high alpha damage Russian shape don't have. So this is certainly one of the best tier 8s, and definitely also worth playing outside of the line as well. And a overall very good tank, and with 420 alpha damage, that is also nice and above average of what a tier 8 heavy does have, because most of them do have either 310 or 400. So that little bit of extra alpha damage is going to help you, especially if you're a new player, to just out-trade the enemies a bit more, which is obviously very nice. And the armor, as I've already talked about, is very strong. So this is definitely one of the tanks that is absolutely worth having in Blitz. And now there's only 4 of them left. As you can see, they didn't really get up fast enough, and that's what you get for it. If you don't get up fast enough, you ain't getting anywhere. There you go, LTG gone. Actually, it's definitely good enough to hit annoying little pests like that, which is definitely very helpful. So now, I could just go around the Tiger, which I'm going to do because I have enough hit points to essentially take a full clip from a T28, so I don't care at that point. Obviously, conserving your hit points can help to win, but if you're in a situation like this, you might as well go for some trades to get extra damage. And now I might not even be able to get the 28, but we have a very good team here, which is something that is somewhat rare. So around 2,000 damage here so far. And now we have to do and get rid of this tiger as well. I think he has the 240 alpha damage gun. Kind of looks a bit like it. Can't really pen the upper plate. Can do that now. And now it is the KV-3 and the SU-152 behind me. That probably are going to struggle somewhat with the Tiger 2's front armor. But the Tiger 2 is apparently more interested in shooting them than me. So I can just keep going here and 2,900 damage, which is, again, somewhat solid. Obviously, for a good average for a vehicle like this, you should probably shoot for something like 1,500 if you want to be on the okay side, or 2,000 if you want to be on the better side. 50 TP. It feels like a bit of a downgrade tier for tier compared to the T8. Nonetheless, it is still a very strong vehicle. And obviously, it is also very good at hull down because it has a massive head that is pretty much impenetrable besides for the tiny cupolas. We do have 8 degrees of gun depression, which is obviously not amazing, but it is definitely good enough. And durability is also solid. So you have an overall very good tank here that is also definitely worth getting. Also a very easy to play beginner tank. 460 alpha damage is very good. Because obviously the higher alpha damage you have, less shots you have to hit to do damage, which is not too bad. I'm still using tungsten here. I don't know why, but obviously it depends on whether one you prefer. I tend to prefer the adrenaline, and the difference isn't really there. But in the end, it's up to you whichever one you use. Okay, 6 TP. Gonna try to bait him a bit forward. He's short. It's nice. Now I can maybe use the gun to push him. There we go. Tungsten were expired, but yeah, that's fine. Okay, now Progetto is gonna have a look at me. It's obviously right there in the middle, which is not great. I'm just gonna unload, but then I'm gonna get rid of him. So that problem has been solved. Okay, now enemy TVP is AFK, so if I can get a free cheeky shot down there, would be nice, but probably not going to happen depending on how he's angled back there. Never mind, I can. There we go. Some free damage. Might as well take it. It should be somewhat in the bag, because obviously the thing is, if you have free damage available, you take it, because if the guy wakes up, then you then have to deal with an alive TVP, while dealing with a dead TVP or a sleeping TVP is a lot easier. So now let's go for E50M. Oh, they're not looking at me, so I can just... Nope, never mind. He's gone. And yeah, that's a complete steamroll right there in 2 minutes, which is very nice. Shot to the 100. Now it's only the ML2, which is a relatively sad tank in its own right. I might do the ML next, but whichever tech trade you want to see next, put it in the comments. Would appreciate the feedback. And how is this compared to the first one? If you haven't seen it, with the E50M, what do you think? What can I do better? All those kind of things, put it in the comments. So we go with the 60 TP, obviously the T10, and the most interesting one. This one's also very useful for capsucker camping, otherwise also known as tournaments. So if you're interested in playing that in the future, then owning this tank is also going to help you out quite a lot there. And while Winter Malinoffka is one of those very few maps where going to the middle of the map can actually be somewhat beneficial. Now, I wouldn't still go up there, because 6 TP isn't the most amazing tank at side scraping. Like, if you have a VK90, by all means, get up there, side scrape. It's going to work beautifully. But for most other tanks, I do prefer to somewhat go a bit more towards the middle, because then, first of all, you can spot enemies a lot easier here, and you can also move around better depending on where the enemy is going to be actually located. Okay. Now the 100's there, the mouse there. That is a lot of free hit points there for me. We'll see if we can spot them. Obviously, there's a Yakpan's E100 somewhere, and there he is. So would have had to watch out for him if he were anywhere in the vicinity, but he is not. So just trying to go for the E100 here. Now it's 317 penetration on the heat rounds, which is not great, as you can see. You are going to struggle to pen the E100 there if it does angle, and obviously the accuracy is not the greatest. So you might run into some troubles of actually hitting the enemy there, but obviously if you aim properly, then that should normally not be a problem. Or, yeah. Okay. Now, they're probably going to try to push me together, but then again, I do have the turret armor, so if they do that, I am somewhat reasonably protected, and I also got the team up there, so I'll be fine. The E100 is going to come that way. So what I'm going to do here is reverse out. Basically, leave the mouse on his own. And the E100 is going to not have a shot on me, so now I can work on the mouse on its own. Okay, 1.5k. That is not so great so far. Already lost a lot of hit points. 2,700 is very high, so you do have a lot of hit points on this vehicle as well, which definitely helps quite a lot. There you go, some side armor. Mouse is dead. Beautiful. There's a lot of heat on these guys, but the penetration of this vehicle isn't the greatest, so that's one thing you have to watch out for, certainly. And especially against super heavies, but if you're fighting mediums, it's not going to be any difficulty. So, nope, there's a Kronvang and a 200. It ain't OP, you just can't hit it. The T100 is a relatively solid tank, but as long as you can hit it, it's not going to be that big of a threat. Okay. Gonna do that again, try to track him as well. And he's gone. It's the player, not the tank. So now T62A could definitely become a threat if he does get onto the side over there and starts pounding away on my hit points. But he doesn't seem to be interested in that. More interested in the 57 Heavy, and the 57 Heavy, if he were to hit his other shot, it would have been a lot easier for him to finish him off. But yeah. Now we got this Jaegeru hiding behind the house somewhat. And we're going to load each. Won't. Jaeger should be relatively easy to finish off now. Probably should not be. Try to bait him a bit forward here, but if he doesn't, then that's fine as well. Now it's only the Kronvang left. And that should also be very easy. So, as you can see, even if you're brawl with an E100 or a mouse, it's going to work. If you're trying to hit a T100 LT, it's going to work. So, overall, this is a very, very good tank. And I definitely do recommend it, especially if you're a new player. And it's a bit heavy as well, so you can do 3 ramming damage if you are interested in doing that as well. But, yeah, the Kronvang is going to go down. It's probably not going to be my kill. But, in the end, that's the 60 TP line. And hope you enjoyed the video. Hope it gave some value to you. And, taught you something about this line, whether you should grind or not. Now, I definitely do recommend it. And, it is a great line. But, yeah, overall, get it. Thank you very much for watching. See you for the next one. Goodbye.